that takes us to agenda item 5.09, which is our first reading and adoption of policy 3203, inclusion, diversity, and equity. And for those of you who are in the audience, this is a continuing conversation that we've had as a board. We've spent about 3.5 hours discussing this policy. So although it's listed here as a first reading, this is not the first time that we've talked about it. Emily Hard and Tony Davis, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having us. And we're happy to speak to the policy and answer any questions. Do you want us to start giving an overview?
Yes, please, if you have it.
I think that we would like to start by saying thank you to the board for being a board that supports equity, a board that has collaborated for months now in this process, a board that's given input, that's asked really tough questions, and been open to revisions and extensions of what was written. So that says a lot about who you are and belonging in this district, and I'm proud to be a part of it. We're excited tonight for this first read of the policy. We know that it's gone through a number of iterations now. We feel like it's better than it was, and we feel that it speaks to who we are as a district. It really is something that we need in Tahoma for lots of reasons, but the main one is that it speaks to those 4 words that are in our visions. An environment that is supportive, inclusive, safe, and welcoming. I didn't do those in the right order, but it really is about supporting each and every student and addressing their individual needs. So another reason this is important is it's a statement to the community and to our staff about who we are as a district. This is something we value, it's something that we care about enough that it's one of the 5 strategic board goals. I also believe that this is super important for our students because our students need to know that they belong here, to have a board policy that puts that in writing, that is very clear about what we believe and what we stand for. Students will know that, even though students generally aren't policy wonks, but they will know about the policy and they will appreciate that the district cares enough to put this forward. We've heard from a lot of our teachers that they want this kind of thing in place. They want it so that they know we have their back, so that when things come up, they feel like they can go ahead and respond. If harassment occurs, racism, and other incidents occur, that they have this as a third point that they can say, I'm going to speak out, I'm not going to be silent, I'm going to address this. And part of the reason is that our board and our school district is fully behind it. So those are some of the reasons I believe this is so important. I'm going to invite Tony to jump in and add whatever you want.
Was this the passing of the torch? Emily has a lot of post-its and notes, and I think in pictures, and where we are and where we want to be. And we have 2 phrases that are sets of words that fit that just perfectly in my mind. Welcoming, safe, supportive, inclusive. Every child, the adults, sometimes we forget that. Every child and adult, every classroom, every day. To me, it's that simple. So I'd like to see this thing be passed tonight so we can roll up our sleeves, get to work, and make a statement to the kids and adults in this community, in our school community. We got your back. And this is your school. That's it for me.
One of the questions that we had
Should lower the mic.
that came from the work study was around the terms and definitions. And one of the changes we made, we did an audit to make sure that all the ones in there were actually in the policy and the procedure. There's a few that are just in the procedure, and since you're not reviewing the procedure tonight, know that there are a few that aren't in this document, but they are in the procedure. Do you have any questions for us?
Since the April 19 work study, what significant changes have occurred to the draft? Because I have the April 19th draft and it looks like there have been some, but I can't tell what. Besides the title change.
Yeah, you'll notice there was a title change. One of the points that came out of that work study was that inclusion needed to be more prominent in this policy. So it's actually the first word in the policy now. It's been added in paragraph 1. And a couple other places as well. In the first bullet on the first page where it used to say narrowing the gaps, we specified narrowing the achievement gaps. Letter E under foundational beliefs was added. That's about the equity lens, and we felt like that needed to be reinforced, and I think that came out of the work study as well. There were a couple of grammatical changes. In the third blue belief statement, we added gender identity. It had gender and gender expression, but gender identity wasn't in there. That was added. Those are the main things.
I can't remember them all. They're different versions. We've been through a handful of versions, not several, a handful of versions. I think she captured it.
I think one other one was the implicit, term bias, Baptist bias, in that third paragraph. We have implicit
Right, we added implicit bias in front, implicit in front of bias.
Emily and Tony, number one, thank you again. Like I've had the chance to meet with both of you and discuss this, and I so appreciate. I know this is like of all the things you could put your effort into and your shoulder, like this is one of the trickier ones these days, and I appreciate the courage. I appreciate the time and the commitment that you've spent on this. And yes to everything you said before inclusion and welcoming and feeling safe. I agree that 1,000%. As you look at like I look at paragraph 3. There's a lot of this that I like. There's parts of it that I really worked hard to get myself in there. I've struggled with it literally for a long time. Through conversations that have happened to you, I've taken those conversations and I've come back and I've struggled with it. And then I've had other conversations and I've struggled again. And I think what it really kind of boils down to me is and I look at paragraph 3, the first page of the policy, and I've been on the board long enough and I've had enough conversations with teachers and administrators and students and families to know that there are things that are happening that fall in this line that are anti-equity, they're anti-inclusion, they're anti-diversity. The thing that paragraph 3 though strikes me is like, it makes a characterization to me as us as an organization, as a district, the way that it's worded, and maybe, and words matter to me as a lawyer. I've spent my entire career reading through statutes and laws and court opinions and everything else, and so I hang on words very carefully. And as I read this, what I see is that our district has institutional barriers that have been defined in its policies, racism, bias, and privilege, and that these things lead to disparate outcomes, and that we need to eliminate those things. I haven't seen those myself, and I realize the position that I'm in. I accept my own view of the world and take responsibility for that. Can you describe for me some of these institutional barriers that are present within the school district that this policy is trying to address?
Sure. One of the most valuable things that I think I've done in the last couple of years is listen to students. And Superintendent Hansen and I have had a number of those sessions with various students. Sometimes it's students and their parents together. Sometimes it's just students. And I think as white staff members, sometimes we don't realize what the experiences of some of our students are, and because we haven't lived it, right? We haven't had children that have experienced some of these things. But what I've learned through the listening sessions are that racial slurs are very prevalent, and it's not just Tahoma. This is my former district, it's other districts with other staff I talk to. So it's not just isolated to Tahoma. This is a big thing that occurs probably in most school districts. But when I worked here earlier in my career as a teacher and a principal, I honestly didn't know how much this occurred. I've had a student tell me that every week he's called the N-word. I've had a father tell me that every day his student has some kind of remark made in class. And every time those things happen, it's been explained to me it's like 1,000 cuts. You know, there's the first time and the second time. When it gets to 1,000, it's really, it accumulates. And it's hard for students to concentrate. And there's something called stereotype threat that where your brain physically shuts down. So we have to make an environment where kids don't have to deal with that all the time. And again, I'm not saying it's just isolated to Tahoma, but this is a thing that our kids are experiencing. And the more we listen to them, the more we understand that it's amazing that they can do as well as they can, you know, because these things interfere with the ability to listen, the ability to collaborate, the ability to get thoughts on paper, or out of your mouth, or any of those things. So I feel like that's one of those barriers. It's bigger than us. It's out in the community, out in the world. We need to continue to work hard to foster that sense of belonging and understanding. There's actually a quote that I like from Cesar Chavez that I noted because it's important to me. He said, "Preservation of one's culture does not require contempt or disrespect for other cultures." And that's something I think we need to work hard to embed in our instruction and our curriculum. Another barrier I'll mention quickly, and then Tony can jump in, but my background is in curriculum and instruction. And we've been looking at our curriculum and auditing and asking ourselves, what are we teaching? What have we been teaching for decades? And we've only been teaching a slice of history. And so if you're a Hispanic student in our classrooms, or you're a student with disabilities in our classrooms, or you're even a female, you know, you're not seeing yourself and hearing stories of yourself in history. So honestly, as a kid, I didn't like studying history very much. And I honestly know now that it's because I wasn't that interested in learning about wars all the time. I wanted to know what the women were doing. And that might seem, you know, kind of silly, but it means, you know, it's more relevant when you see yourself. And our students haven't had, some of our students haven't had the opportunity to see themselves in the curriculum, in our books, in lessons, that kind of thing. So that's another barrier because it affects enthusiasm and just ownership in their own learning.
Well, I think it's in the stories that we hear. And the one that comes to mind, I'm trying not to use names or genders so that you can't even begin to piece together who it is I'm talking about. About a week and a half ago, a student who, and let me begin too, saying, I believe that our teachers have the best of intentions. And when kids walk in their rooms, they have the best of intentions for every one of the kids that walks in the room. And this particular teacher, we had a phone call, actually started with the student coming to the admin team, and then parent and student meeting was set up with this team. And a short version of this is she explained how she feels in his class when he does certain things, but he doesn't do those same things with other kids. And it was such an eye-opening experience. And what we have to do is we're training our staff is to be able to duplicate that aha moment, like this teacher experienced, so that they can just allow themselves, again, fancy words, pick the one you want to use, this bias. Mike used to use the phrase ladders, not this Mike Reigns. But that ability to teach our staff to take their life experiences and their life perspectives and set them off to the side and start from scratch with each kid when they walk in the room. That's what we're working towards. That's the first example that comes to mind with your question. Hope that makes sense.
It does.
I skipped a lot of details on it intentionally.
And I would refer to my other directors, but I think yes and yes, right? That's I understand. I think the word institutional barriers, as a board, like the policy has to give us something we can do. The policy is to give us a framework by which we can hold accountability. Right? We can say we can make a decision as a district and as a board, we can say that decision fell within policy or opinion. And that's where I really get stuck on, because the examples, absolutely, I agree 100%. I don't know from the board though, like what is actionable for us to do that, right? As we go forward, and we think about it, we have an equity lens. I don't exactly know what that means. I've proffered some suggestions as to how we could frame that. As we think about policies, or we think about practices that may have disparate outcomes, then my question is, from an equity lens, does equity lens just say that, okay, there's a disparate outcome, so there has to be a change to that? Do we stand that up against a legitimate, rationally related purpose and then weigh it? I don't have a clear view on that, and so I'm struggling. Yes to everything you said. When it comes to changes to our institution, to this district, that's not where that's where I get a very unclear picture of what this policy allows, the framework that this policy gives.
Okay, the way I would respond to that is that a policy lays the groundwork, but it's the procedure that really spells out the actions, the practices we're going to take, and we're not looking at that tonight, but the procedure. For an example in the procedure is around staffing. So we know as a school system, we've got to do something different with our staffing. We have, for the most part, a white staff. And just like curriculum and books, students need to have role models. They need to have role models that look like them. So that's something that we've been talking about and making plans, and HR's been learning and going to conferences, and we have a committee working on that. We've now added interview questions that focus on equity, so that every interview, there's at least one question around equity, so that applicants know that's important to us. We're looking for people that have some understanding or want to learn about it. That's what we're looking for. That's one of the criteria. That's an actionable item. There's another example in the procedure on curriculum and instruction. And Don's leadership has created some processes that we're looking at now, including the equity lens. So years ago when we adopted curriculum, or we updated it or whatever, we might have asked ourselves a couple of questions about, is there bias in this, or, but we didn't look at it deeply. Now we're looking at it deeply. We're looking at the content, and we're looking at the messages in the illustrations in the text. So those are a couple of examples, but I think your question's getting at, so now what? So we've got this piece of paper. This is important, and then the procedure has to follow it with more detail and more definition. So I think that we're doing them separate, and maybe that, there's reasons for that, but I would just say, I think you have a copy of it, but that hopefully would answer some of the questions that are rolling around.
Yeah, it does.
And I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you because we're past the 3 minutes by a lot, actually. So, other directors, do you have any other questions that you wanted to share? Yes.
I have a comment here. Yeah, thanks for more of a comment. I appreciate being Hispanic male. One of the focus I have is, in your comment about teachers is, what's not important to me is to have a Hispanic teacher teaching my son. Is to have the best teacher, right? And just to make sure as we proceed forward, we're always thinking what's the best and what's the right balance for this, right? I think there's a proper balance between all of what we're doing here, what's best for the students and also what's best for, I think if you match that balance, then it is truly the best for the students. So appreciate you doing it and keep up the good work. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. And,
I'm gonna just respond to that. Yeah, the wider the net, the more competitive the pool is. We just got a wider net. Mike can probably tell you how many school districts there are in the state of Washington, and every one of them is making the same statement. So the challenge is, what are we going to do different? What are we going to do to get the best, but also have the best that it looks like the folks that are sitting in the chairs in the classroom? We just have to do it different and do it better. And we're working on this to figure out these things.
And I was just going to add that just like we have high expectations for our students, we're not about lowering the expectations. The expectations stay high. It's a matter of supporting our students to get there. Same with our staff. So we are looking for the best. We want to diversify our staff while we're doing that. You know, we have two goals, and we think that we can achieve both.
Yeah, oh, definitely can.
I just want to thank you. For me, this is, the policy is, you know, the book of truth. It's what guides us all. It's our foundation. It's what our teachers need to be able to say, yes, I can offer this support to my kids because it's written right here, that this is what I'm supposed to do and this is what they need. And I'm just so excited about this. And I think that everything that's going to come from this, even the procedure, you know, Matt, I totally get it, you know, thinking about we want maybe not the Hispanic teacher, but we want the best, you know, in reference to your comment. I think about myself as a woman in construction and, you know, walking into a room full of men and every single one of them was the best contractor. But for me to walk in that room and see a woman that was a contractor, it just spoke to me. So that's how I can this resonates with me, and it's just so valuable. I'm so excited selfishly for my own kids to be brought up into a district where they're gonna know equity is at the forefront, and it's woven into the fabric of everything we do. I just couldn't be more pleased, and I'm really excited also to talk about procedure. So thank you so much to both of you. Thank you. I'm excited. Jim?
I just wanted to comment on the process for how we got here. When I first saw it at the January work study, my copy of the policy was covered in a lot of red because I've been using the red pen a lot. And I believe at the end of the night, he took a copy of my notes. And I'm not sure what really happened in between there, but when I saw the policy again in April, it was covered in a lot of red, but not because of my pen, but because there have been a lot of changes. I also did January draft here, but it would be much less dramatic for me if I go around in my bag for it. But, and that means that when I go to students, when I talk to students on the student voice committee, when I talk to students that felt like they would be impacted by this, I can genuinely say to them, the discussion that we're having right now is going to have an impact because people are actually listening to this. They've actually taken my feedback and said they'll work on that. That's a lot of times the response I get from students. Okay, sure, we can have this discussion right now, but what impact will this have? And I think seeing the fact that from January to May, there has been such substantial revision to it that has responded to the feedback that community members have provided really does communicate to the student body, at least through my role, that their voice does have an impact.
Thank you for saying that and noticing that, and we hope that that was evident. I did want to mention that there was a lot of input into this. It was people at board meetings that gave public comment. It was our equity support team. It was our equity steering committee. It was the board itself. People that had a voice that, you know, either wrote or came to talk to us. So this was a very collaborative process and one that morphed and changed quite a bit through the process. So thank you for this comment.
Can I ask one quick question? So I forgot one thing. One thing that came up for me during the work study was I just wanted to make sure that our disabled population of students was really represented in our policy. Do you guys feel like you've gone through and you feel really good about where we're at with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a number of places where, like if you look at the third we believe statement, education of each student requires a respect and appreciation for differences, including but not limited to, and you know, there's a whole list of them there, but it is addressed and mentioned, so.
Okay, great.
I think so.
Yeah, the benefit of going last, and we all have covered just about everything. But I just really appreciate the process. I appreciate the opportunity to codify a belief system in a really important set of documents that governs, what we do in our district. And the fact that there is a need in our system for a third point document that can support conversations that need to happen to support students and adults in our system. I just really appreciate this opportunity to be able to be bold and make a statement and provide that tool to our system. And really the process, the level of involvement from so many different angles and so many different voices, the fact that you put your ladders to the side, you took that genuinely, you took it seriously and incorporated it. And the journey that we've been on has been lengthy, but oh so productive, and really proud of the work that's happened. And I'm really thankful for the both of you for your leadership, your experience, and for contributing to all of this work that we have. So thank you.
And I will just add on that I'm also incredibly grateful for all of the time and energy you put into this. And when I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we talk about students needing to have a full belly and needing to make sure that they feel comfortable in a classroom before they can ever even start to think about their ABCs or their math facts. That's what this is all about. This is about helping every single student and every single adult feel like they are in a safe space where they're truly valued and seen. And so this is not only important, it's critically important. And so I'm so thankful for you for helping make this come to life for all of us. So with that, yes, Superintendent Hanson.
I want to take a minute to express some gratitude to Emily in particular. It was over 2 years ago, and it was in that room right over there, room 59A, where I asked you if you'd come on board and support this work. And I was absolutely thrilled when you said you were excited to do it. And you think about some of those early conversations that we had about the pace, about the timing, about all sorts of things, and the tough road ahead. And you think of the ground that you've covered with your leadership in the last 2 years. And I certainly owe you a debt of gratitude, and I think our school system. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks. I will say with all sincerity, it's been a privilege to do this work. It really has. It's been a highlight for me, so thank you.
Well, with that, we are going to move on. So thank you both so much.